All right, so who are you?
Well, I'm your mother, so my name is Karine Davies.
Okay, and how many children do you have?
I have 3. I have a boy called James, who's now 26. I have a boy called Ben, who's 23, and I have you, who's 20.
And how old were you when you had children?
Well, I tried from the age of 27 and only managed to have my first child when I was 33 because I had endometriosis and all sorts of problems. But I knew from the moment I got married that I wanted children. So, yes, so I was 33. So I'm an older mother as a result.
I know. Now, what did you do before you had kids? And did you think you were going to do it forever?
No, I knew I didn't want to teach, which is ironic because that's what I've fallen into. But I was a trainer for British Airways and then left British Airways to become a trainer with another company. Only what I didn't realise was that the man didn't want any of his staff getting pregnant. So I was forced to leave that job because I was pregnant. If I'd stayed at British Airways, there would have been a whole package of maternity leave and all of this. I didn't have any of that, which looking back on it now I'd be able to sue him, take him to court, but in those days, nothing.
Wow, okay. So what made you decide to have kids?
Oh, I knew from a young girl that I always wanted children. I was always the one at school who was looking after people. You know, the kid who had a bad knee or had fallen down, I'd be the one taking him to first aid. I was always quite maternal. It was the one goal I had in life. I knew above anything else I wanted children.
Okay. And so how did you feel when you found out that you were pregnant?
Well, after so many years of not being able to fall pregnant, I was very, very happy. And my mum was still alive at that time, so it was wonderful. I can remember it was November, and I told my mum that I was pregnant, and she cried. But it was with you. So I had 2 boys, and then I got pregnant again. The 2 boys I had a lot of help with in order to get pregnant. And you just kind of came along, as you always say, miracle child. The boys like to say accident, but hey, here we go. And because I was an older mother, I had to then have an amniocentesis, which is where they have a needle, and I'm not exaggerating, this long, that they plunge into your stomach to extract the amniotic fluid to tell whether you are okay. And you were fine, and that's when I learnt that you were going to be a girl, and my knees went out from underneath me, and I phoned up your father and cried down the phone, and he was convinced that something terrible had happened, and I just said, I'm having a girl. I was so happy.
So how did you think being a parent would change you?
It's a difficult question to answer because I never thought it would change me adversely. I always knew that it would complete me. I knew that I had to have children in order to feel whole. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's I loved every moment of being pregnant. I loved everything about it.
So were you right in your prediction of how it would affect you?
Yes, I don't feel my life would be as good if I didn't have children.
You're welcome.
and yeah, I adore being a parent, and that's where I'm having the problem now.
So what's it like being responsible for a young child?
Oh God. I really, really enjoyed the responsibility. I have to say, before children, when I was at work, when I was doing lots of travel itineraries for people, it would be quite daunting, the responsibility of it. But I never felt that with a child. I kind of just got on with it. I think sometimes if you were to take a step back and realise the enormity of it, it would be completely overwhelming. With James, I did feel that. It was when I came home from the hospital, and we'd been in hospital for 6 days because he'd been in SCBU, the special care baby unit, because he had problems with his lungs. So I had to stay in for 6 days in hospital. And when I came home, I can remember sitting down and just bursting into tears, and I just thought, oh, He's mine, and I've got nobody else to turn to. It's all to do with me, and that's quite scary. And then actually, after you've had your first child and you realise that you haven't killed them, you kind of relax into it a bit more. But you're always up, you're always worried, you hear the crying, I barely slept. And by the time you came along, you virtually brought yourself up, because I was chilled. I was very chilled by that time.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad I could help relax you in the future. So how is your parenting style different from your own parents?
Oh. Well, I had very, very strict parents, a very strict mother who wouldn't let me go out. I was told I wasn't allowed to go out until I was 18. So I wasn't allowed to go to the youth clubs, I wasn't allowed to go to dances, I wasn't allowed to go out at all. So suddenly when I turned 18, I was like floundering. But when I was 17, we went on holiday, and my friend and I went down into the town in France, and we were 5 minutes late coming back. So my mother, typical style, grounded me for the rest of the 6 weeks. I wasn't going to be allowed to go out at all at night. So I snuck out at midnight when everybody was asleep and came back at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was me doing that made me decide that whatever happened, I would think very carefully. I wouldn't automatically say no. I would think very carefully about what you asked. And I would always consider how it would impact upon you, because you were quite strong-willed, a bit like me. And I knew that if I just said no, a blanket no, you would do it in any case. So that's why you were allowed to go to the festivals, you were allowed to go out, you were allowed to do lots of things that I certainly wasn't allowed to do. So I think in terms of parenting styles, I learnt a lot from my parents. I broke the mould, and I decided that I would be more liberal. And I'm sure that you have times when you felt that you were unfairly dealt with. But you know what? It's very difficult being a parent, and there are always things you're going to get wrong. There isn't a manual that says this is how you parent, and every child's different. So James is different to Ben. You think you've got it all sorted out when you have your first child, and then the second one comes along who is the opposite, and you have to start all over again. You're a mixture of the two.
Well, you're welcome for that, making it a bit easier.
What can I say?
So what do you feel is universal about being a parent?
I think the universal thing about being a parent is that you just have to love your child. You have to give that unconditional love in order to help them to grow and to realise their potential, I think. Because it's always something that's bothered me is 2 weeks before my mother died, I asked her why she'd never told me that she loved me. And she said, I just assumed you knew. And it's something that I've always done with you three. I've always told you how much I love you, because I feel that children need to hear that. You can't just assume that they know, because as a parent you get angry, you tell your children off, you give them rules, you give them parameters that they have to stick by, and they get angry at feeling boxed in, and you have to help them to understand that you're doing it because you love them, and it's unconditional. It is completely unconditional.
Oh, that's so cute.
Well, there's also a bit of passive aggressive and blackmail and all sorts of other things that happen at various times. But it's hard. It's always a matter of negotiation.
Makes a lot of sense.
I think. But at the base of it all is, no matter what you do, no matter what happens, there is that well of love that is always there.
So,
yes.
What was it like sending your kids to school for the first time?
Well, I really wanted to be that parent who had their child clinging to them going, Mummy, don't send me. But you all skipped into school without a backward glance. And I was left there thinking, oh, okay, fine, okay, they don't love me. But actually, I'd done what I set out to do, which is make you independent children who were happy to be away from me. That's the aim of being a parent. You are moulding this soul into an independent person so that they can find their own life. It's not a question of them making you feel better. You have to help them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making any sense.
The hand gestures at helping, it makes sense, don't worry.
Yes, and if I'm completely honest, by the time you get to 4, it's actually quite a relief to have a bit of time to yourself, for your child to go to school, so you can actually sit down and take a breath and think, oh, right, okay, I've got a bit of time to do this.
So, were the teenage years as tough as Emma always said they are?
I really, honestly did not know what to expect. So I can remember sitting James down when he was about 13 and saying to him, I read up so much about it because I'd heard horror stories about kids being monosyllabic, being rude, flouncing out the house, all this tension and angst and everything else. And I sat down with James and I said, look, I don't know what to expect with this, but all I know is that we have to keep the lines of communication open. So my expectations are fairly low for what's going to happen. But whatever happens, James, we have to keep talking. Your dad never really got involved with any of this. So, and I can remember James coming home one night and I said, what's wrong, James? And he stormed upstairs and flounced into his room and I thought, oh, here we go. So I walked up into his room and I said, James, what's wrong? And he literally sat on the bed. I don't know. And so we had a big talk about puberty and about hormones and emotions. And that's the thing. I've always been very, very open with all of you. And we've always been able to talk about all sorts of things about emotions and everything else. So I have to be honest. None of you were awful. Seriously. I dreaded that time between 13 and 16. Yours caught up with you and you were about 17. You were lovely. Everybody kept, because there was a mother at school. It was Abby. I don't know if you remember.
Abby.
Yeah,
I watched that.
That's
yeah,
right.
Abby.
So Abby, when you were 4, Abby turned around to me and said, oh, I'm going to want to see this girl when she's 14. You are going to have hell. Because of the kind of child that you were at the time. And in fact, that never presented itself. I was honestly ready to have all sorts. But no, you were lovely. I think we had a great time when you were a teenager. You don't remember you were a teenager?
No, I better remember last week. Like, come on.
No, it was lovely. We used to do lots of things together and you were happy to come up to London and we did trips.
It was great. I loved it.
And it was really lovely. And we could always talk about anything. No, I really enjoyed it. Whereas my mother and I, it was very, very difficult. Very difficult. I was not a very easy teenager purely because I felt so restricted and boxed in and unable to be the person I was and didn't feel loved. So, but that's another story completely.
Right, so what was your biggest fear about being a parent?
Oh, losing you, about you either being killed or losing you in a crowd or you being abducted, etc., etc. You falling ill, breaking a leg, being hurt, because no parent wants to see their child in pain. They would, if they could, take that pain from them. So I didn't want to see you in pain. And just wanted to make sure that you were the best version of yourself that you could be, and wanting to facilitate that. And I know I've made mistakes. Of course I've made mistakes. Every parent makes mistakes. But I've done the best I can, and I'm quite happy with that. But yeah, that was always my biggest fear, that something would happen to you, as happened to a friend of ours in the village where she lost her daughter at 16. I honestly don't know how I would have coped if, even now, if one of you were to die before me. I think I would just go to pieces. So I think that's the fear. Yeah, I think for me that was the fear.
Well, on a cheerier note, what was your favourite thing about being a parent?
The fun. Oh my goodness, the games, the laughing, the just, because, for instance, when we moved home, and I was really quite distressed about moving home, and it was you standing in front of me singing Shake It Off or Let It Go, and just cheering me up, always being able to stop me being so serious and have a bit of fun. So for me, it's been the laughter, it's been the fun times, it's been going on holidays and just enjoying each other's company, which I think we did do. I hope we still do.
Yeah, of course we do.
So favourite thing about being a parent, and having somebody who loves you initially when they're really young, who loves you unconditionally. There are conditions attached as they get older, but that, just that love that comes with a child is just the best thing in the world. I wouldn't be without it.
Well, but during these tougher times when we were younger, more like teenage years, did you ever think back to when you didn't have kids and just wished it was that easy again?
No.
Never?
Honestly, never.
Wow.
I never wished you away, ever. Ever, ever, ever. There was the odd day when I'd think, oh, I just wish I could have some quiet. But it lasted for a few hours. I never longed for a time when I didn't have you, because actually my life was boring before then. So
cute.
I had work and I worked hard and I enjoyed the job I was doing. But as I said before, it sounds so ridiculous and it sounds like something out of a cereal packet, but I honestly felt complete once I'd had you. Don't tell the boys, especially once I'd had my girl.
I'm going to tell them. You can't stop me.
I'm not saying that you're my favourite,
But
because
you're saying
I do.
that I'm your favourite.
No,
Mm-hmm.
I
gist.
love the fact that I have a girl, because, well, apart from the fact that you're amazing, but so are my other two children. But I think there's a very special bond between mothers and daughters. People always talk about the bond between mothers and sons. I never found that. But I found an immediate bond with you, and I think mothers are more relaxed around daughters when they're older. For instance, now James is in a relationship with and living with his girlfriend, and we still haven't been invited over to his apartment. Now, if it was you, I'd just turn up with some food and just say, you haven't invited me, here I am. I wouldn't dream of doing that, because I don't want to upset Paige. Isn't that bizarre? It's just...
It's understandable, because in a relationship, the mother of the son is very differently perceived than the mother of the daughter. Like we were talking about when people in relationships go to people for holidays for food, the girls usually go to their family.
That's very true.
Rather than going to the guy's family.
Yeah, that's
It's very different.
Yeah.
So no, I think it's
it
completely
is.
valid.
Yeah.
It's true. But if you did turn up at my house unannounced, I would tell you to leave. I'm like, Mum, I've got to leave.
No, you wouldn't.
Mum,
You'd
intruding.
You'd invite me in for a cup of tea.
I'd invite you in and then I'd sneak out.
Yeah, just show you where the cleaning things were and say, here you are, Mum. Make yourself useful.
Yeah, I'd give you a glass of wine, leave you on the sofa, you'd be fine.
No, so, what was the question?
Now, what was it like sending your kids off to university?
I was, well, James didn't go to university. He went to RADA for 6 months, was still at home. I seem to remember sending James off to Australia for a year,
Yes.
virtually kicking him out and saying, you need to go, you need to grow up, you need to just go and do something. So because I was in control of that, I was fine about it. I missed him, but I was fine about it. I was really proud of Ben going to university, and considering when Ben first started thinking about going to uni, he wanted to go to Birmingham because he didn't want to be too far away from the house, and then ended up going to Aberystwyth, which is about as far away as you can get. And I was really worried about Ben because of all the children. He's the one I wasn't sure would be able to cope on his own, and yet he proved me wrong. He coped perfectly well, so I was very proud of him. But again, because you're my last, that bittersweet thing, I knew that this would be the last time I was seeing somebody off to university, and I knew that this is the beginning of the end, in the sense that once you came back from university, you would no longer want to stay at home because, and quite rightly, because you would want to go out there and make a life of your own. And so suddenly your time as a parent, you're always a parent and you'll always be there for your children, but your time as a parent is at an end.
So do you feel like it's easier to be a parent now, or is it easier when we were a lot younger?
Oh, well, it's very, very different. There are many rewards to being a parent now because you have an adult relationship. So you can talk, you're more friends with your children now. But when they're younger, you always have to bear in mind that you are a parent, and no matter how much you want to be a friend, the most important thing is that you guide your children, and there are going to be times when your children are angry with you because you've made a decision, and certainly under the age of 13, 14, you've made a decision over which they have no control. After that age, there is a certain amount of control that comes in, but there are stages in a child's life where it ebbs and flows. So, for instance, every child when they're 8 years old just becomes horrible because they're trying to take that step away from their parent and gain more independence, and that means they become less cuddly and less amenable, and then they come back to being like that, and then they start senior school, and then they start edging away from you again, which is how it needs to be because they need to gain their independence. So it's like that all the time. There's this ebb and flow of the way it goes. But in terms of being easy, I think it's easier now in the sense that I don't have as much responsibility.
Yeah.
Because you are responsible for yourselves.
Yes, it's
now.
horrible. I hate it.
But I'm always there in case anything happens. I will always be there to help. So in terms of that, it's easier. But then I like being in control. So I actually quite liked being in control of you children. So it's a...
Mm-hmm. It's a scale.
It is. Well, it swings and roundabouts. It really, really is. It's just different.
Well, do you feel you have more freedom now?
I do. I do feel I have more freedom, whether I want that freedom or not. I have to learn how to use that freedom again. I found it quite hard being free again, because it's not something I've relished parenthood, and it's not something I've really been looking for. I miss the noise, I miss the fun in the house, and I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily doing lots of things that I didn't do before. I think you leaving for university has affected me quite badly, but I'm determined not to just sit round and feel sorry for myself. So I am trying to look for something different. As you know, I'm looking for a new job, but it's not easy when you're 60 because people then don't want to employ older people despite all our wisdom and everything else. So yeah, freedom. I can't say that I was like dancing around going, yes, they've gone, hallelujah, we can do this now. I miss the noise and everything else, and mothering you.
Well, I don't miss that, but I do miss you. You're great. You cook for me. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I love cooking. Yeah.
But okay, now the big thing. Have you learned anything from your children? And if you say no, I will not be happy.
Have I learnt anything from my children?
I'm very educational.
I'm quite judgmental as a person.
No, really?
I do rush to judgment. And I think I try to be less judgmental. I think I've learnt a lot more patience. I can remember a friend saying to me that Ben was put on this earth to teach me patience.
Mm-hmm.
Not one of my stronger points. So I think I've become more patient, and I think I've generally relaxed a bit more, and I'm trying to have a bit more fun. I think I'm quite a serious person, even though I try and look jolly and everything else. Deep down, I'm quite serious and quite sensitive to other people's needs, and I kind of rush to help them. And that's not always the best thing. Sometimes it's better just to have a bit of a laugh. So I think you and James certainly. Ben, please don't get me wrong, he's just a different personality type. But you and James have really taught me how to have a bit more fun and just to stop thinking about things so seriously.